That affidavit has always been part of our bundles, Chairman. What was missing were the annexures. And we were having a little bit of difficulty at some point in dealing with those annexures because, as you indicated, without the annexures, the evidence itself creates a few difficulties. So we now have most of those annexures, Chairman. So we will be taking Mr. Tabete through those, just so he gives context to what he has said in his affidavits. Chairman, in light of that, might I ask leave to hand up two documents, two files. The first one is Exhibit HH10B. It's Mr. Tabete's affidavit, but this really consists of all those annexures that we've been able to source. So they're just annexures, they're nothing else.
Oh, okay, okay.
Chairman, then this...
Is there an indication here, or the affidavit is there as well?
The affidavit, Chairman, is in File A. We've had it all along. You may even have scribbled notes on it. I really am not sure. It's the very last affidavit in File A. So you now have...
So in other words, what I have here is the affidavit that we have always had, but which did not have annexures.
Correct,
But
sir.
now we also have annexures.
Correct.
It's the complete set as far as that affidavit is concerned. Maybe there might be some annexures that you haven't been able to get.
Chairman, there are annexures we have not been able to get.
Yes.
I'll
but
be
most are
indicating...
here.
Sir?
But most are here.
Most are there.
Yeah, okay.
Then, Chairman, the second file I would like to hand up and ask you to admit to the record is an additional reference bundle. The documents in this reference bundle largely come from documentation we sourced from another witness's bundle. You will be hearing her evidence in due course.
Okay.
But because she hasn't appeared before you yet, we thought it prudent to use, she actually had more information than Mr. Tabete was able to source. He's been struggling to get information. So with your leave, Chair, we have called this Exhibit HH, Reference Bundle F for Freddie.
And this one that you have already handed up, you'd like to be
the one
as Exhibit HH10B?
Correct, sir.
Okay. The liver arch file containing Mr. Tabete's affidavit of 10 August 2017 with annexures thereto will be admitted as Exhibit HH10B. And then this one. Do you want to keep it as Exhibit HH without any number?
Chairman, with the reference bundles, we haven't given them numbers.
In the past?
In the past.
Okay.
If I might, Chairman, assist, we've in fact just given them lowercase letters of the alphabet.
Yes.
To identify that particular file, to make it easy to identify.
Okay. The liver arch file. That has got various documents starting with Free State legislature copies, member translators. Actually, it's marked, it's reflected as appropriation bill. So the file, the lever arch file containing various documents, starting with appropriation bill, an appropriation bill will be marked Exhibit H, reference bundle F. Yes.
Chairman, there's one more reference bundle that ought to be with you, but is not, we have found. It is reference bundle E, which comes just before the one you've just admitted.
Okay.
My recollection is that you had admitted it the
Yeah.
last time we were here at
Yes.
some point.
Okay.
So one of the investigators has gone across the road to make sure you get your copy.
Okay.
As far as I know, Chairman, we will not be referring to it.
Okay.
Certainly not in the first hour.
Yes. Okay.
Might I proceed, Chairman?
Yes, you may proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Tabete, good afternoon again.
Good afternoon.
I am hoping to do the following, to try and
Oh,
Yes.
I think we were going to let his counsel place himself
Oh,
on
yes,
record
indeed.
first, yeah, especially because there's now been a change of legal representatives.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair.
Good afternoon.
I'm Ngabayethu Buthelezi on instruction from Lukisani Manja attorneys, now representing Mr. Tabete.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tabete, I was just indicating that the first thing I'm probably going to do is just put the version of Mr. Musebenzi Zwane before you. The Commissioner has now received his sworn statement, and I think at some point the Chairman may elect to ask him to come and give oral evidence. But because we don't know when that might be, I just want to be sure that you understand his version, especially in relation to your roles and responsibilities as he understood them and set them out in his version. So I will be putting that to you. I'll just start with that to get it out of the way. That will then be followed by the annexures that we were missing from the 2017 affidavit. We'll deal with those very quickly. You'll just give content to them now that you have them before you. Those have indeed been placed before you. After that portion, we will deal with outstanding matters arising from the questions we had asked you earlier on, and also just seeking clarity on one or two aspects. And we will hope to complete this entire exercise by tomorrow in going through some of the annual financial reports, going through the monthly and quarterly statements that Estina presented to you, etc. So that's the idea. We're hoping to finish with that section. There are one or two other things we had indicated to you that there are media reports we will be putting to you, etc. But those are very short questions that are knitted into what we will be asking you. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, check.
Yes.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to check, Chair, I haven't received the
affidavit.
affidavit yet.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm sure you will make it available to him ahead of him having to deal with it.
Chairman, if that's your ruling, that's in order, but we
No,
don't...
I'm not making a ruling. I'm just saying I'm sure that you don't intend to ambush him.
Chairman, I didn't understand that when an implicated party gives us a version, that we give that version to the next implicated party. That's really how we're sitting right now. Mr. Msebenzi Zwane is an implicated party.
Okay, no. I think what we have been doing is when a witness as opposed, I mean, they are all witnesses, but a witness as distinct from an implicated person has implicated somebody. When that person has given the Commissioner version, then that affidavit will be given to him, to the witness. So I think effectively he is saying he would expect to be finished with a copy. I think what should happen is his counsel and yourself will talk and then we'll take things from there. Is that, in other words, if they want to put a request, they first discuss with you, and there may be no need for any ruling, but if there's a problem, then it can come to me. Is that fine?
Not really, Chairman, because that's what I was going to start with. But if this
okay.
because it's just another witness who's going to say something
Yes.
about him, and I
Yes.
thought that he should at least have the benefit of hearing that
Yes.
before we go back to where we were essentially when we
Yes.
stopped last
Yes.
time. But this is
Okay.
why I say I'm in your hands, Chairman. I'm
Okay,
guided
no,
by you.
I see his counsel seems to want to say something, and maybe let me hear what he has to say. It may or may not be necessary to adjourn for a few minutes to resolve the issue. Yeah, let me
Thank
hear
you,
what he
Chair.
has to say.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a similar problem that keeps arising at the Commission, where a witness is served with a Rule 33 notice, and after having been served with this Rule 33 notice, is then expected to respond to the contents or the paragraphs in the implicating statement that there is. Confusion somewhat exists between ourselves as to say, are we here to answer to allegations that are contained in the statements of other witnesses, or are we here on the strength of our own independent statement? And it is our understanding and our request that if Mr. Tabete is expected to testify or give answers with regards to the evidence of another witness that may have potentially even implicated himself, then he be given ample time to consider that, so that we don't stall the Commission when he's unable to provide answers or give context to questions that are not intended to ambush him, in our understanding.
Yes, well, I use the term ambush.
I accept it.
But it might not be appropriate.
Yes,
It might not be appropriate. I think what we should do is I should probably adjourn for something like 5 to 10 minutes, give both sides a chance to talk about the issue, and then when I come back, if it's resolved, it's resolved. If I have to make any decision, we can take it from there. Or if a decision must be made at another time, then that would be fine. I think the difference really is here, that certainly Mr. Bashe wants to put to Mr. Tabete whatever version Mr. Zwane has, so that he can comment on it.
Yes.
That's for sure. That's one. Two, the question would be whether Mr. Tabete should have a copy of that affidavit before he's asked or not, or is it enough if he's told, this is what you have said, but Mr. Zwane says this, what do you say, you know? And it may well be that at a practical level, really, having a copy or not might be neither here nor there, you know. So maybe let me adjourn for 5 to 10 minutes. It's 20 past now. And then let's say at past, I will return, unless in the meantime, both sides have approached me in chambers. So if there's no approach, I will just return.
Indebted to you, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you understand what's going on?
Yes, I do.
Yes, okay. I'm going to adjourn then until
That's really what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, Chair, we had a very long debate on this matter. I remember we wanted to decide whether it was a strategy or a concept.
Or that is yours. When you say we, is it yourself and Mr. Zwane or yourself and other officials in the department?
No, in the commission. We did debate it in the commission.
Outside of the hearing or in the hearing?
In the hearing, Chair.
Oh, okay. It's been a long time. Since then, I've had the evidence of many other witnesses. Yes, okay. So what is the point you want to make?
Yes. What I'm saying, Chair, we are going back there again.
Well, it might be necessary sometimes just to refresh our memory and to reconnect. But it depends. But I see Ms. Kabashe is shaking her head to say we are not going back. So I think I'll allow her to ask the question again and then see if you can answer it. Yes.
Mr. Tabete, all I'm asking is, as whether we call it a strategy, whether we call it a development framework, as that was being refined, this is what I understood of your evidence, that you had to work with it. Did you get input from your political principal in your department? That's all.
Yeah, Chair, we made inputs. We made technical inputs into his idea. My understanding is that it's us who are making input to refine it so that technically it becomes implementable.
I don't know. You, in case it's not clear, you might have to make it clear, but it may be that it was clear. My understanding of your question was that it related more to refining implementation or how it would be implemented as opposed to the concept, but I may have misunderstood. But I think the answer seems to relate to the concept.
This is why I was just going to ask,
yes,
for clarity's sake,
yes.
Mr. Tabete, if what you are talking about, the refinement, you are talking about the inputs you gave Mr. Zwane, whether those were before the budget speech where the legislature heard about it and before he told his EXCO colleagues about it, because that would just clarify the matter. So your inputs were before he took steps to put the policy position to his colleagues.
Yes, Chair. The policy position ends when he goes and presents a budget speech and presents the projects to the legislature for implementation and the allocation of the budget. That's where we then come in and make inputs, because that is his policy speech that he presents to the legislature. Then once that has been concluded, then our responsibility is then the implementation of what has been made policy now.
So the input that you are talking about that you made to his concept is input that was made prior to him presenting his budget speech.
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman. Now, because this started out as Muhuma Mubung, you eventually reshaped the implementation by selecting the Vrede Dairy Project as a mega project. Is that part of implementation or just that selection of Vrede as a mega project? Was that part of implementation and therefore part of policy, or was it part of the everyday application, that kind of implementation? Just help me understand.
Yeah, the Vrede Dairy was one of the mega projects of Muhuma Mobung. It was not the project. there were other projects under the same concept that were being implemented. So the Mohuma Mobung can not only be referred to Friede Dairy.
Mr. Zwane? Mr. Tabete?
I think you
Chairman?
are close to paying.
Eating keep you washing, Ibegela. Mr. Tabete, I really am not trying to trick you. I really am simply trying to understand implementation as you experienced it there. So it's a matter of understanding what it is that you and the officials in the department did once the Mohuma Mobung broad concept had been adopted by the legislature. Because once that broad concept had been adopted, you then looked at various projects.
That's correct.
I have no difficulty with that. But you also, in looking at various projects, selected the Friede Dairy project for special attention. Am I correct?
Chair, I will not say necessarily special attention, but it was one of the key projects.
Maybe let me see if I can ask you this question. The decision that there must be Friede Dairy, there must be the Friede Dairy project. The making of that decision, I take it, was part of the implementation of the policy. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
And that decision was made by the officials, that is yourself in the department, the people who were meant to implement.
Yeah, Chair, that's correct.
Yes.
What is true is that we from all the presentations that we have made on projects to the Executive Council, for this commission, only that one was singled out.
Yes.
But it is not the only projects that we go to the Executive Council
Yes.
and request approval.
Yes.
I understand that for this specific reason, we are responding. But my understanding is that it shouldn't look like when we went to the Executive Council, we only went to present one project, which was the Friede Dairy. No, it wasn't. There were others which we had done so.
Well, even if you had gone there for one, I mean, in principle, why should that be wrong? You know, so I don't think that's Ms. Kabashe's concern.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Tabete, I'd just like to move on because there are a couple of other things that I want to place on record in relation to what Mr. Zwane has to say. So he says that after the presentation to the legislature, the project was handed over to the department, and he did not interfere with the duties of the administrators whose responsibility it was to implement the Mohuma Mobung project. Would you agree with that?
That's correct, Chair.
What he did, however, do was, by way of example, assist in the identification of beneficiaries.
Yeah, Chair, after the project is approved for implementation, we do the implementation. Our responsibility is to report back to him on progress. That's what we then do. If, for an example, we've got difficulty, like in the issue of identifying beneficiaries, we'd go to him and say, this is the issue that we may need you to assist us to do as part of our report back to him.
Well, I just note the reference to interference that he says he did not interfere. And I note what you have just said. I don't know what he regards as interference and what he doesn't regard as interference. But from what you say, it's clear that, and one would expect this to be the case, that you would report back to him on implementation.
That's correct, Chair.
To see how is the implementation process. And I take it that as you report back to him on progress, he would raise questions where he thinks there should be questions, and maybe he would even make suggestions. Is that not so?
Chair, that's correct, because he needs to have a full understanding so that when he goes to the legislature and questions are raised, he should be able to respond to those questions.
And it may well be, but you might not agree with this, it may well be that he would also issue instructions on implementation.
Chair, my understanding of interference is that of the PFMA. When he gives you instructions to implement things that are not in line with policy.
Yes, it might not. The issue might not arise. So, if it arises, we can go back to it.
Thank you, Chairman. So the example I had given was in identifying beneficiaries. He assisted in that regard.
That's correct, Chair.
Did he assist with respect to the selection of a strategic partner?
Chair, no. I think we had gone through that also, how the strategic partner was selected.
Yes, but the how the strategic partner was selected is one thing, but the question whether he had any input on the selection might be another. So the question is whether he assisted in the selection of the strategic partner.
Yeah. Chair, I wouldn't know, because the strategic partner was not selected by us, if I'm referring to Estina.
Yes.
It was selected by Paras. So I wouldn't know.
Okay.
Just for the record, my understanding of your evidence is that the strategic partner was Paras.
That's correct.
And Paras then selected Estina, but the strategic partner was Paras.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Zwane goes on to say that he was not required to approve the appointment of Estina as the implementing agent. Is that correct? And please, this is important, he was not required to approve the appointment of Estina as the implementing agent.
Yeah, it's a very tricky question, Chair.
I think I can understand. Maybe let me ask a related question. As a matter of fact, do you know whether he approved the selection of Paras as a strategic partner, irrespective of whether he was required or not? Do you know whether, as a matter of fact, he did give approval?
Chair, as part of the Executive Council,
Yes.
he has,
Okay.
because that agreement and approval was
Yes.
done by the Executive Council, and he was in the Executive Council.
Yes.
So he was part of that approval
Yes.
by the Executive Council.
Okay. I think you would have picked up, Mr. Bashe, that for me, what I wasn't sure about the required part was whether it meant he was required by law or not. So that's the part that was in my mind. That's why I put that question.
Thank you, Chair. It brought clarity. Your question did bring clarity.
Okay.
The next portion then is in respect of the payment of funds to any creditor or recipient. Now, again, he was not required, and this is the language you used, if my recollection serves me well, to approve the payment of any funds to any creditor or recipient. That is an administrative function.
Chair, that becomes the responsibility of the administrators.
Yes.
To-
So do you accept his version that he was not required to approve any funding?
No, you see, there are two things, Chair. When he goes to the legislature, he requests the legislature to approve the budget
Yes.
of the department, which includes the FRIEDE project.
Yes, yes.
Once that approval is given to him
Yes.
in implementing that project, that automatically gets translated to the administrators to implement.
Yes.
So it doesn't play a role anymore in terms of approval once he gets the approval at the legislature in terms of budget allocation.
But also, that means that when he goes to the legislature, he's the one who is saying, please approve this budget,
Yes.
which
and
has got these components.
That's correct. Yeah.
Therefore, and he can't say to the legislature, approve this, unless he is happy with it. He's himself approving of it.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yes. So, but the point we are making is approval within that context, he gets involved,
That's correct. Yeah.
but not outside of that.
Outside, that's correct.
Okay.
Then his view is that the Mohuma Mobung project was a great idea and a flagship project that would have put the Free State province on the map had it been executed properly. Great project. It would have put the Free State province on the map had it been executed properly. That's his view. Do you share that view?
That's correct. Yeah.
The implication, yes,
If I may check something, Chair.
Yes.
If it had been properly executed,
Yeah, and properly executed means properly implemented.
yes. If it was given an opportunity to be executed, that would be my version to that statement.
So you seek to qualify your answer
Yes.
to say, you say, if it had been given a proper opportunity to be executed,
That's correct, Chair.
is your position that it was not executed, or it was executed but was not given enough time?
Yes, that's correct, Chair.
Okay.
I'm not sure which of the two. Chairman, I thought you put two
Yeah.
different propositions to
Yes, I
to
did.
Mr.
I
Tabete.
think he agreed to both, but let's help because it could cause confusion.
Yeah.
As I understand it, what you are saying, you admit that it was executed, but you are saying it was not given a proper opportunity to be executed.
To be executed.
Which seems to suggest to me that more time. You are saying more time should have been given to it.
No. Chair, what I'm trying to say is that because when the project was being implemented, a problem started from the initiation. When it was started, then problems came. So it never had an opportunity to be implemented properly. My understanding is that he's referring to that. Because the other version could have been if the official could have implemented it properly, which is not my understanding, because if that was the case, then it's a different story.
Well, you see, he might not be particular with how he's formulating it. But the one option, the one proposition could be the officials who were supposed to implement it failed to implement it properly. That's why we have this problem. Another proposition would be to say the opportunity to implement it was not a proper opportunity. So some execution was tried, but it didn't work well. because there wasn't a proper or enough opportunity. But from what you are saying, it seems you are saying it wasn't given an opportunity from the beginning. Is that right?
Chair, I'm agreeing with your second option.
Yes.
That's why I was trying then to correct,
Yes.
to amend the
Yes.
statement to say
Yeah.
it is not because of the failure of the officials, but it was because of the opportunity that was not granted for the project to be implemented.
Maybe you can just clarify what you mean by the project wasn't given the opportunity to develop in the manner in which you had envisaged it would. Maybe that's the only area where I don't understand you. What opportunity?
Chair, we had intended to deal with this earlier on. That when we were starting the project, there were so many articles in the media. You'll remember it was, we were beginning to implement the project when there was the Waterkloof,
The landing.
the landing.
Yes.
And it was that time that everything came to a halt.
Why did anything have to come to a halt about Friede because of the landing, waterproof landing?
Exactly, Chair. Because that was the time when the first article about Friede Dairy came to being. And you'll remember the testimony of the first witness that came in here referred to that. And all the investigations that came thereafter was based on that newspaper article which was on Mail and Guardian. So from that time, there was never an opportunity to implement because it was investigation after investigation. So we never had that opportunity to have the time to implement it.
Mr. Tabete, I want to challenge that thinking, but I will do so tomorrow on the basis of the monies that were advanced to make sure that this dairy project got off the ground. But it's a specific issue because we'll look at how much money was put in, we'll look at the quarterly reports that were presented to the officials, and then make an assessment, I think, on where things went horribly wrong.
That's correct.
I think if we generalize now and look at the period 13th of June 2012 to roughly the 30th of April 2013, which is the time of the Waterkloof landing.
Yes.
We had about a year. I don't want us to generalize about what could have been done in that period. We'll look at the numbers and the allocations and use those to determine what could have been done, if that suits you.
Yes.
What I'm trying to explain is that this was a 3-year project.
Yes.
It stalled in the first year
Yeah.
of its implementation. Hence the statement that if it was given the opportunity to be implemented, it would have been one of the greatest projects.
Well, Ms. Kabash said she will deal with this tomorrow, but I wanted to ask you, why do you say the fact that somebody wrote an article in the newspaper about Waterkloof landing or about Friede Farm, that takes away from you the opportunity to do your job?
Yeah.
They didn't come physically to physically prevent you from doing your work about Friede?
Yes, that's correct, Chair. But that triggered a lot of problems. I think if when we come to it, then I will explain. One of the issues, one of the bases, when that happened, National Treasury
the writing of an article in the newspaper.
Yes,
Yeah.
the investigation that was done by National Treasury was on the basis of the newspaper article, and they mentioned that in their report.
Yes, and so what?
And
They,
then,
they can investigate. You carry on with your job. If they say, we want to have 2 hours with you tomorrow to ask you about this, you say, okay, I'll make time. You see them for 2 hours. They want to see somebody else. You say, the staff is available. You can talk to them. After you are done, you continue, you do your job.
that's correct, Chair.
So how
But-
does it take away from you the opportunity to implement which you otherwise had before somebody wrote in the article?
Yes.
Wrote an article.
Chair, National Treasury wrote a letter to hold the project. A letter was,
Yes.
we received a letter from the National Department of Agriculture saying we should not be allowed to proceed implementing the project with the money that was allocated.
That I can understand. When did that happen?
It was, Chair, it wasn't,
Well, Mr. Kawashi just reminded you that the Waterkloof landing was in April 2013.
yes.
So
and-
when was this?
Until that time, Chair, everything was progressing well.
Yes.
In terms of implementation, in terms of the infrastructure that was on the ground.
Yes. So you had a year.
Yes.
Yes. More or less.
That happened very well.
Yes. Okay.
Now, after the landing, we were then beginning to enter into the second year.
Yes.
And that's where the problem started.
Yes. But when did the letter from National Treasury, or did you say National Department of Agriculture?
National Department of Agriculture.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, Chair, it was June, July.
June, July
It's
2013.
an August, it's an August letter. It's an August letter.
It's August-
it's an
August
August letter.
2013.
We have a witness who'll be dealing with that
Yes.
next week, Tuesday, Chairman.
Yes.
Yes.
From
Okay.
the department.
Yes. So August 2013.
Yes, August 2013 was the final withdrawal.
Yes.
They write you
Yes.
before with an intention to withdraw.
Oh.
But already the letter from National Treasury to instruct agriculture
Yeah.
not to allow us to proceed had already been written.
Okay, but what you do say is, so is the position therefore that you are saying that what took away the opportunity to implement the project was the instruction to stop
That's correct.
using the fund, not the newspaper article. The newspaper article brought the issue to the attention of the world.
Okay, that's correct.
But it's not, it is something else, not that one.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct, Chair.
Okay.
And just for further clarity, Chairman, the amount that had been allocated by the national office, that's the CASP, we've talked about the CASP grant,
Yes,
and we have a witness who'll deal with it in detail on Tuesday.
yes,
That was 53 million.
yes.
Of the 53 million, you know, Mr. Tabete, you had already spent 24 million. And what the national office said was the balance should be allocated to one of the other projects.
That's correct, Chair.
Take it away from this one.
Yes.
And they gave you specific reasons why they were asking you to do that, and you know that.
That's correct, Chair.
We are going to get to that later, Chairman, because the reasons had to do with whether they met the Department of Agriculture and Rural Development met the conditions that were attached to that 53 million in respect of what they were doing at Vrede. So it actually has nothing to do with the Waterkloof landing. I agree with you, Chairman. Please, Mr. Tabete. It has nothing to do with the newspaper article. Please, Mr. Tabete.
Yeah, Chair,
Yes.
can I go back to that?
Yeah,
Remember, the investigation by National Treasury is quoting that newspaper article. Hence, I'm referring to it.
yes, but just because they are quoting that article doesn't mean it's because of that article that you are not given an opportunity to implement, you know. The article brought up what it brought up. If you say we were instructed to stop at a time when we were still implementing, and had we been given a chance to continue, you would have seen what would have happened. We would have come up with something very beautiful. That's something else.
That's
Okay.
correct, Chair. Thank you.
All right.
Now, my understanding, again, is that it's the department that identified the possibility of establishing a processing plant. Now, this is the milk processing plant in the province. It's part of the Mohuba Mobung thinking. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And your version is that Mr. Zwane would have been part of this at that strategic policy level, part of that discussion.
That's correct, Chair.
And the identification of the Vrede Dairy project as a mega project, again, Mr. Zwane would have been part of in terms of the strategic decision. Is this your version?
Yes, Chair. The decision to add value comes even beyond the Free State. It comes from the NDP document itself, the National Development Plan, to say provinces like the Free State are doing well in primary agriculture, but we're not doing much in terms of agro-processing and value adding. Hence, that strategic decision flows through like that. That is what is also agreed in the Free State Growth and Development Plan, to say agriculture must begin also to do agro-processing and add value to the products. Hence, when we then presented that idea, it was acceptable that this is what we're supposed to do. Therefore, I agree, Chair.
Then at paragraph 42 of your 2018 affidavit, you state that the agreements relating to the Vrede Dairy project were approved by the Executive Council and Mr. Zwane, who then was the MEC for Agriculture. That is your evidence.
That's
correct. And this is actually what you say
That's
in
correct.
your affidavit.
That's correct.
Then in your 2019 affidavit, which you've made for the Commission, at paragraph 37.5, page 13, you state that you did not perform any function or take a decision in respect of the implementation and execution of the Vrede Dairy project without having followed the prescribed departmental processes, number one,
That's correct.
or without having first obtained the required approvals and authority from the MEC Agriculture and Exco. That's correct.
That's correct.
That's what you say in your statement.
That's correct.
Now, I take it that when you speak about the approvals and the authority of the MEC for Agriculture, you would there be referring to Mr. Zwane, and then when she did take over, you would there be referring to Ms. Kabate.
That's correct.
I'll just leave it at those two because they really were there during the period we've been debating. So that says to me that you did one of two things. You either asked them for guidance as you were implementing, or you asked for instructions as you were implementing. Which of the two was it?
Chair, when we seek approval of the Executive Council, it is the MEC that goes to the Executive Council because the MEC is a member of the Executive Council. So we generate the submission to the MEC. If the MEC agrees, then he goes and he presents it to the Executive Council for approval. Hence, I'm saying, if he would not have agreed, he would not have gone to present it to the Executive Council. Hence, I'm saying the way we're putting it there.
Yes, but the question is whether you asked for guidance or asked, Ms. Kabashe says for an instruction, but I guess it could also be said approval, but she said instruction. So what did you seek from them? Was it guidance or an instruction?
It's guidance, Chair.
Okay.
You also state in your 2018 affidavit at paragraph 51.8 that Mr. Zwane recommended to the Provincial Treasury the release of the required funding because it was necessary to shift funds between projects as provided for in the 2012-2013 budget of the department.
I'm sorry, Ms. Kabashe.
Yes, sir.
Please don't forget that question. I just want to ask something on the paragraph that you just read to Mr. Tabete a few minutes ago. You see, Mr. Tabete, you have just said that when you asked what you sought from the MEC and EXCO was guidance, but that's not what paragraph 37.5 says, which is the paragraph that Ms. Kabashe just read. It says, I did not perform any function and did not take any decision. And listen to this, in respect of implementation and execution of the Free-Added Dairy project. Without, I leave out other things, having first obtained the required approvals and authority from the MEC, Agriculture and EXCO. Is there something I'm missing there when I compare with what we have just said? Maybe I am missing something. Maybe the two can be reconciled.
Yeah. Chair, she gave two options.
Instruction or guidance, yes.
Guidance,
And
and
you
I
said
understood
guidance.
you putting the third one.
Yes, but you didn't.
I
I wanted to focus on what she put to you, the instruction and guidance.
Yes.
And you said guidance.
Yes, it's more of guidance because what we request from him is approval.
Yes.
Because the MEC's responsibility is oversight
Yes.
when we are doing implementation. That's the responsibility of the MEC. So my statement is actually saying I wouldn't decide to implement a project until such time that the MEC and the Executive Council agrees with the project.
Yes.
That is what my statement is actually saying.
Yes. Well, that may be right, but that might not, that's not the same as guidance. You remember you just said a few minutes ago,
Yep.
you would be seeking guidance.
Yes.
If you seek guidance, you are not seeking necessarily approval. Guidance you can disregard if you have got good reasons, but if you seek approval, if you don't have approval, you can't proceed, isn't it?
That's correct.
But guidance is not the same as approval. Guidance is, I think this is how you should handle it. But you are not bound. You can reflect on it. In the end, you might decide, no, this is going to be problematic. And the person who gives the guidance understands that it's guidance. It's not an instruction. That's my understanding of the two.
Yes.
Do you have the same understanding?
I did, Chair. If approval would have been one of the options, then it would be the correct one. I know, Chair, I've been in trouble with the evidence leader of not answering the question.
Yeah. So you say if the options you are given included approval, you would have chosen approval.
Approval, that's correct.
Not guidance.
Not guidance, yes.
Yes.
Because guidance must be, in my understanding, could be overarching over also approval, but the most correct one is approval.
Of course, what you could have said is none of the above. It's approval. You could have said that, isn't it?
Yes, Chair. I've had trouble before with the business leader of not answering.
I can see that you are more scared of being in trouble with counsel than with me. So you are saying, therefore, now, when you approached them, you were seeking approval.
Approval, that's correct.
Not guidance.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
And we are still talking about the implementation of a resolution taken by EXCO. Am I correct?
That's
I don't want to get things mixed up.
That's
That's
correct.
what we're talking about.
Yes, but Chair, that statement in my affidavit refers to approval before the implementation. It's not referring to approval after the implementation, because you have already received the approval. You would not ask for another approval.
Yes.
So just by way of example, that resolution of the 13th of June 2012, if there was anything you did not understand that was in that resolution, you would again go back to the MEC and say, can you explain what you meant by clause 3?
That's
This
correct.
is what we're talking about.
That's correct.
It's important to differentiate that between administrative decisions such as the deviation decision that you took,
That's
Mr.
correct.
Tabet. Because as I understand matters, on the deviation decision that you took, that was your decision.
That's correct.
Okay. I just wanted that clarity so that we don't get things mixed up. Excellent.
Well, you remember earlier on I said I didn't know what Mr. Zwane has in mind in talking about, in using the word interfere. I did not interfere. And in how you responded. But I gained the impression from what Mr. Bashir read as part of his version that he was saying his role was limited to policy. Once it was implementation, he would not get involved. But this paragraph suggests to me that he was as fully involved in the implementation, at least in the taking of decisions relating to implementation, as you were, if it is true, because you say, I did not perform any function and did not take any decision in respect of the implementation and execution of the Free Dairy project without the approval of the MEC and EXCO.
Yes, Chair. That's why I was then qualifying that statement. That statement refers to me implementing any project without approval of the Executive Council. That is how I had put it. It was not referring to decisions during the implementation.
No, Mr. Tabeta. In this paragraph, do you have the paragraph in front of you?
So it's in your statement. It's Exhibit HH10,
A.
Volume A. You will
that is
find
fine.
it at page 13.
Page 13.
That's your affidavit before this commission, which you deposed to in August 2019. Page 13, paragraph 37.5.
Yes.
Can you, have you found it? You see,
I have it, Chair.
yes, you see, it doesn't talk about many projects. It talks about decisions in respect of the implementation and execution of the Free Dairy project. So as the implementation happens,
Yeah.
decisions have to be taken. And what it says is that you did not take any decisions in relation to the implementation of this project without That's how at least I read it. I may be mistaken without the approval. It may be that it shouldn't be read literally, because then maybe it would be very difficult to do anything if you had to go back to them all the time. But that's what I read the paragraph to mean. And when I read it and I bear in mind what you just said and what he said about the officials being involved in implementation and he being involved in policy only, I seem to find, I don't find much harmony, but it may be that I'm missing something. Do you understand where I come from?
Yeah, I hear you, Chair.
Yes, yes.
My understanding when I had put, it might not have been put maybe exactly the way I would have wanted it to be. But my explanation in this is saying what I'm explaining. It's not meaning that during the implementation I had to constantly go and ask for decision. No, it's not saying that, Chair.
Well, that's fine. I'll leave it to Ms. Kabashe to make of it what she may, either now or later. Yes.
Chairman, what I will say is that the context being the prescribed departmental processes and the approvals and authorities that lie with those executive officials, I understood this to mean that where that was required, you would go and get those approvals. But where it wasn't required, if it was something that was within your remit, you would just go ahead and do what you needed to do. This is how I had understood it.
Yeah.
Well, what kind of approvals in relation to implementation decisions would be required of the political head, the MEC or EXCO, for the implementation of this project, after the EXCO had given the approval that we have always been talking about?
Chair, this paragraph is referring to that initial approval of having agreed that these projects can be budgeted for and that the project can be implemented. So that's what this paragraph is referring to. You will not be able to implement without obtaining the required approval. So the required approval is the Executive Council approval to do the project and also to have the budget allocated to the project. So you cannot do the implementation without having obtained those required approvals.
So it refers to, you are referring to the approval that had already been given, that was given first before the project came to you for implementation.
That's correct.
Yes, I think let's continue. I think I'll have further questions about that. But let's continue. I'll look at it overnight as well. It may be that it may be that it doesn't necessarily reflect what you intended, but to me it doesn't seem to say what you say. What you're saying it says, you know. But let me look at the whole affidavit overnight, and then if need be, we can talk about it tomorrow.
That's correct.
Okay.
But that's my intention.
That's your intention, yeah.
That.
Whether or not it reflects it correctly is another matter.
That's correct.
Okay.
Chairman, with your leave, I just want to again give context to what I understood that paragraph to mean and what Mr. Tabete's evidence is, which is that EXCO resolution. And I'll just very quickly say what EXCO approved was, one, the implementation of the proposed Vrede Dairy Agribusiness project. So in relation to that, he would have to have a relationship with the MEC. EXCO approved the sourcing of additional funding of 84 million. And again, in relation to that, there would be discussions about where that would come from because it wasn't budgeted for. Am I correct?
That's correct.
The next one that EXCO agreed on was The department should meet the costs and will later be refunded and engage other relevant departments. Again, that is what you would be talking to the MEC about, but it's a resolution that had been taken.
That's correct.
And so you would consult him on that. Then the matter would be further discussed in the Treasury Committee, which is part of my next question, because, again, the provincial treasury was important to the implementation. That's, again, an approval by EXCO, correct?
That's correct.
Then the FDC, the Free State Development Corporation, should also play a role, especially from the business point of view. You, again, discouraged to engage in discussions with them.
Yes.
And then the last item is that for the next 3 years, the Department of Agriculture will have to pay 113, it should be million, it's written as 1,000 here, 113 million in respect of this project.
That's correct.
So that is what I understood to be the context of
This.
following prescribed procedures, consulting as and when you needed to, just in relation to what they had approved.
That's correct.
I just wanted to give you this document as well, Chairman, to read at your leisure.
The resolution.
Which is the resolution. It's in your file, Chairman.
Yeah, what page on my file?
It's reference file A, Chairman.
Oh,
It's a poor copy. I know we have a better one elsewhere.
what page?
It's page 323, Chairman. And at a later stage, we'll tell you where you can find a better, it's legible, but there is a better copy, we believe, in the court record file. But it's very clear
Excuse me.
that
Yes, I'll
these
have
are
a
the
look, yeah.
items they have approved.
Yes.
And I understood
I
that to
think
be
what will be
context.
important is also to just read some of the paragraphs in the affidavit surround before and after that paragraph to see whether it fits in with what Mr. Tabete says.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Chairman.
On the face of it, it does seem to be problematic to me, but I must just check.
Yes.
It may be that once I've checked, my problem will go away.
I should also remember, Chairman, that much as we have studied the documents, you have read them, but not studied them the way we have had to. Because you have just so many matters in 1 week.
Yeah.
So I will,
that's fine, yeah.
I will take that into account,
Yes.
Chairman. And so, Chairman, my colleague says page 175 of the same bundle has a better copy of that document, just a slightly more legible.
Same being
The
reference
bundle A,
A.
reference bundle A. It's
Okay,
just a
what's the
little more
page?
legible.
What's the page?
175.
175.
And that's where everything really starts, in a sense,
Thank
Chairman.
you. Okay, I've got it. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. And this is why, in the same context, and again, correct even me if I'm wrong in my understanding, you state at paragraph 51.8 of the 2018 affidavit that Mr. Zwane recommended to the provincial treasury the release of the required funding because it was necessary to shift funds between projects as provided for in the 2012-2013 budget of the department.
I'm sorry, you're reading from where now?
Chairman, so if we go to the 2018 affidavit of Mr. Tabete,
And where?
at paragraph 51.8, Chairman,
And which bundle is it again?
it's again the very same, my apologies, Chairman. It's not this one. It's the 2018. If you go to page 114, Chairman,
Of which bundle?
of Bundle A, Mr. Tabete's statements,
114.
114, Chairman. So that is the 2018 affidavit. So we start with the 2019 affidavit, then we have the 2018 affidavit. The last affidavit is the 2017 affidavit. We are currently looking at the 2018 affidavit, and the particular paragraph is on page 114 of Bundle A of HH 10.
Okay, I've got it.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, you prefer, and Chairman, you know that you've got a better copy right at the end, because the one, but it's also called page 1. Right at the end, we put in a better copy, a more legible
But this
copy.
one looks legible.
Oh, if you are happy with it, Chairman, that's
This
fine.
one is legible. Maybe the one that was supposed to be later was put in here. This is quite,
Legible.
yeah. Yes, I've got 114.
So we are looking at paragraph 51.8, Chairman,
Oh,
and if I might read it into the record.
Then I haven't got, I'm not on the same page as you. This
MPT
page
114.
This page 114 I have is of reference bundle A.
No, Chairman. HH10, volume A. You were reading the other paragraph from the FE from the same file, Chairman. So it's HH10, volume A, page 114.
If I may assist the chair,
Yes,
the number have
just
been
found it.
they have been replicated towards the end.
Oh.
The clearer, you'll see the number repeats again starting from 099. Then the
Okay, I
clear-
found 114, which has got paragraph 50-something.
Correct,
So that
Chairman.
must be the correct one.
Is that a clear copy that you
That's a
have?
clear copy as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, yes. Thank you.
Chairman, just for context, what Mr. Tabete was dealing with here was, he was explaining how, if you look at the earlier pages very quickly, he was explaining how the implementation of this particular dairy project took place.
Happened, okay.
Yes. So at 51.7, he speaks of the implementation and the funding structure as
Yes.
explained in the proposals. And he refers to that EXCO resolution of the 13th of June. Then at 51.8, he says, for purposes of the release of the required funding, it was necessary to shift funds between projects as provided for in the 2012-2013 budget of the department, which transfer was approved by the Free State Provincial Treasury on the 20th of June 2010. The request which was made to the Provincial Treasury in this regard was not only recommended by me, but by the MEC for Agriculture. And then he says there is an approval.
Yes, okay.
So my question in relation to this, Mr. Tabete, is I've understood that you had to try and accommodate the finding of funding.
The funding, yes.
Yes. So my question is, what role, therefore, did the MEC play in assisting you in either giving approval for the shifting of funds or giving guidance on where else you could find funds?
Chair, the assistance of our responsibility will be to find where the fund will be allocated. Once we have found the money, then we make a submission that the MEC approves, because the budget is gazetted. He must then approve so that we submit to Treasury for the shifting of those funds, because we are changing a gazette. And that approval was then recommended by him, because in that instance, the approval must come from Treasury. He must recommend to Treasury. That's what I'm trying to say here, that he also recommended for the approval that we then shift those funds. And that line item comes from the EXCO resolution that we were required then to find those funds.
Okay.
But again, the fine distinction there is that that wasn't the day-to-day implementation of the project. You were still at a more strategic level, making sure you had funding for the project.
That's correct, Chair.
Again, I've told you the context in which I'm interrogating issues is I'm trying to understand implementation by the executive and by the administration. I'm still doing that. Can I move on to the identification of land for the dairy project, Mr. Tabet? Mr. Zwane's version is that he was not directly involved in the identification of land for the dairy project. He was aware that there was land available, but that's about it. Your evidence, however, before the commission was that it was Mr. Zwane who told you about the availability of land and said that you should talk to the Phumelele municipality about what could be made available. So there's a bit of a difference there, which I think it would be useful for you to clear up. He says he wasn't directly involved, and you say, in fact, he's the one who told you where you could go and talk to people about land. If you can, clear it up. If not, we'll put the same question to Mr. Zwane.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think it's a matter of semantics, because we were looking for land, and then he advised us that talk to the municipality. I'm aware they have land. Whether we would call that identification or not, I'm not sure, but
Yes, but that's what happened.
that's what happened.
Yes.
And when we engaged the municipality, there was an indication that yes, indeed, we do have the land, and then we started those negotiations.
So your evidence remains the same.
That's correct.
Thank you. Mr. Zwane, in his affidavit, then deals with the travel to India, which he had to approve and recommend to the Premier to approve.
That's correct.
You remember that memo?
That's correct.
Now, he seemed to be under the impression that you were going to India with other government officials. Where would he have gotten this impression? My understanding of his affidavit is Mr. Narayan is one person, and he speaks about Narayan going with you. In fact, he says he recommended Narayan.
Yes.
But over and above that, he seems to have been under the impression that you were going with other government officials. Had that been the original plan?
Chair, I'm speaking under correction here. He might have confused other trips with this one. That could be very easy, because there were other trips where I went with government officials. So
To India.
To India, yes.
So your short answer is you did not indicate to him that you would be going with other government officials. You did not say that to him.
Chair, the submission that goes to the Executive Council for the approval would not go there without going through him. He must sign it before it goes for approval.
And that stated exactly who you would go with.
That's correct, Chair.
So would it then be correct to say that he could not have thought that you were going with anybody other than whoever was written in the documentation that he approved. After approving that documentation, he couldn't have thought you were going with anybody who had not been approved.
You would not have missed it, Chair.
Yes, but why are you running away from the way I'm putting it? You being the HOD of his department,
Yes, Chair.
everybody within the department who needed to go overseas would have needed his approval.
That's correct, Chair.
Therefore, once he had approved what you gave him,
That's correct.
reflecting who you would be going with, he could not have thought there was somebody else from within the department that you would be going with other than those he had approved.
Yeah, except the fact that he recommends also, Chair. He doesn't approve, he recommends.
Yes, but what I'm saying is nobody would be approved by EXCO or by the Premier that had not gone through him.
That's correct, Chair.
So he may or may not be mistaken, but as far as the point, after he had approved, there was clarity as to who was going.
That's correct, Chair.
And there were no other officials
That's correct.
other than the people mentioned in the documentation that he was happy with.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
Can I just explore one element of your discussion with the chairman? Are you saying that even in respect of junior officials, now you are the most senior public servant, so of course the MEC must approve your travel, you can't approve your own travel. But if you were going with a director or with a chief director, would the MEC also have to approve those people traveling with you? Or would you, as the head of department, approve the chief director or director traveling?
Chair, in line with the cost containment measures, a decision was taken that all overseas travel must be approved by the Premier, irrespective of a level. That was the decision, Chair.
And they could only be taken to the Premier by the relevant MEC.
By the relevant MEC.
So no matter how junior an official in our department was, if he was going to go to India with you, the MEC would have seen that name.
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah.
Mr. Tabete, then for some reason again, Mr. Zwane seems to have been under the impression that you were meeting other government officials in India. Are you able to throw any light on that aspect?
Chair, I can't, because my understanding was that the approval was on the basis of a submission that he recommended to the Premier for approval. Hence, I was saying in the beginning, maybe he might have mistaken this trip with other trip, but it shouldn't be.
But you say that the approval of the trip included, entailed that he would have, the documentation, the submission,
Yes.
would have told him what the purpose of the trip was
That's correct.
and who the people were that you were planning to meet
That's correct.
in India.
That's correct, Chair.
So he wouldn't have had to guess who you would have to meet,
That's
or at least anyone that was important for the trip.
Yes,
And if there were government officials, they would have been stated in the submission.
that's correct, Chair.
And if they were not stated in the submission, it means they were not part of the plan.
That's correct, Chair.
You see, because when he suggested that Mr. Narayan accompany you, as I've understood his version, it was because, one, he thought that without a protocol person, you remember you'd explained the whole protocol issue to us last
That's
time.
correct.
Now, Mr. Zwane thought that without a protocol person, you would not get the best outcome from the meeting you would be attending. That's the one reason.
That's correct.
The second reason was, he says that they did not want to be disappointed or disappoint the foreign government officials. I'm not sure I understand that clearly. I thought you might be able to explain this. That he did not want you to be disappointed or the people you were meeting to be disappointed, hence the selection of Mr. Narayan to accompany you. Is this what you understood?
Chair, I can't comment on how he understood it.
Well, you can comment to a certain extent if, for his impression of who he says he thought you were going to meet, he advances a certain reason to support that.
Yes, correct.
You may be able to say no, but that doesn't make sense because of ABCD. That couldn't have been true. So I'm just saying, as I understand, he seems to say something that seems to explain why he may have had a certain impression in terms of who you were going to meet.
I hear
You may or may not be able to. I'm just saying it's not true necessarily that you might not ever be able to comment. It depends on what you are being told. You might evaluate it and say, no, what he's saying in support of his impression really is not justified by what I know he knew.
Chair, that's where I have a difficulty because
yes.
When he was given the presentation and requested to recommend for approval, I don't know what was his understanding at that time. Because if I say he knew, I must be very certain that.
Well, you may be able to say, as far as you know, he must have known ABCD because he was given certain documents. He must have read them because he approved what was written there.
Yes, Chair, that's what I was saying, because it was in the document.
Yeah, but that's how you must articulate it. Ms. Kalash, I don't know if you want to repeat your question so he can then answer it.
The question really was that Mr. Zwane seemed to be under the impression that if he didn't send a chaperone with you, I'm calling the person accompanying you as somebody who would be assisting you in that context, you would be disappointed and the government officials you were meeting would be disappointed. So he thought it prudent to send a protocol person to be of assistance to you.
Yeah, Chair.
And if you don't understand what he's saying, you are free to say you don't understand what he's saying.
Yeah, the difficulty I have, because the evidence leader says he was under the impression. You see, I haven't seen the affidavit.
Yes, but take what the evidence leader is saying as true. So you are free to say, if that is what he is saying, this is my answer.
Yeah. I don't understand, Chair.
You don't understand this thing of disappointment.
It will be a problem for me to answer when I don't understand the question.
Do you know any reason why the absence of a protocol officer on the trip would have disappointed you?
I'm confused.
Yeah, no. What was important about the protocol officer in your trip? What was important? If it was the presence of a protocol officer was not important, don't see why you would be disappointed if there was no protocol officer. But if you know of a particular reason, maybe you are able to tell me. Mr. Bashe, it was the protocol officer that he is talking about in relation to disappointment.
Yes, and Narayan in particular
Narayan,
was the
yes.
protocol officer
Yes.
who Mr. Zwane actually
Yes.
recommended.
So I ask you the question, Mr. Tabete. Would you have been disappointed if if a protocol officer or Mr. Narayan was not there?
Yeah, Chair, it's a very difficult question because
It can't be a difficult question.
I'm a technical person. The people that are worried about protocol is at the political level and at the Premier Office. That's why they told us they insist.
Yes, but we're not talking about those people, we're talking about you. My question is whether you, Mr. Tabete, would have been disappointed if there was no protocol officer in the trip.
I would be
Because he
disappointed.
says you would have been disappointed.
I would be disappointed, Chair, if there would be an expectation in terms of the protocol to do, and there wasn't anybody to advise me to do it.
But knowing what you know about the trip, would you have been disappointed if there was no protocol officer?
Chair, my understanding is that a disappointment comes when you do something not knowing you should have done.
No, Mr.
Then you get a
Tabete,
disappointment.
if you are going on a trip, you know if you need certain people, and without those people, there are going to be challenges, serious challenges. You'd be disappointed if your PA is not allowed to go with you, or your deputy is not allowed to go with you, because you know you are going to rely on your deputy on the issues that will be discussed in India, for example. Did you need a protocol officer as far as you are concerned for the trip?
Chair,
As far as you are concerned, don't bother about what anyone else might have thought. Did you need a protocol officer?
Chair, if I go to a foreign country as a government representative, where I don't understand the protocol, I would need a protocol.
Did you need a protocol officer on your trip to India?
It was necessary, Chair.
It was necessary.
Because I was going to a country that I don't understand its protocols.
Were you going to meet government officials in India?
Not necessarily meeting government officials, Chair.
No. I'm talking about the trip.
No, Chair.
Were they in the plans? They were not in the plans.
No, they were not, Chair.
So why would you need a protocol officer if you are not going to meet government officials in India?
My understanding is that protocol does not only apply in government. I'm not trying to defend, Chair, the need. I'm saying to me it did not come as an embarrassment to me.
To what?
To have, not to have.
Okay. Maybe embarrassment is close to disappointment. Let's go back to my question. Would you have been disappointed if there was no protocol officer on the trip?
Chair, I wouldn't have
You
until
would not
such
have.
time that something would have happened.
Yeah, but if you are told there will be no protocol officer on the trip before you depart for India, you would not have been disappointed.
No, I wouldn't, Chair.
Yes. In fact, I seem to think, and you must tell me if I'm wrong, I seem to think that previously you did testify that you didn't see any need for a protocol officer. Is my recollection wrong?
No, Chair. The only what I said, I appreciated the presence of the person to assist with the interpretation. That's where my appreciation came in.
You needed an interpreter.
I needed somebody to assist me with the interpretation.
Yes.
And
Not necessarily a protocol officer.
most of the time, the protocol officer that is allocated to you will be somebody who understand the language, who understand, and so there is a number
Yes.
of people, they get selected based on which country are you going.
Yes, but what you are saying suggests to me all you need is somebody who can interpret for
Do
you.
the interpretation.
What else he does, that's something else, but you need somebody who can interpret for you.
That's correct.
Okay.
In fact, what Mr. Zwane in his affidavit refers to is the foreign culture, the foreign language, somebody to assist in in helping you communicate effectively. I'm just giving you the highlights
Okay.
of why he thought a protocol officer would assist. But my next question, though, is that you had been to India before in 2010. I know that's on your CV.
That's correct.
In fact, when you had gone to India in 2010, you had gone to do an assessment, and this is from your CV,
That's correct.
on a request for accreditation of an establishment for the export to South Africa of deboned and deglanded frozen buffalo meat.
That's correct.
So you'd been to negotiate
Yes,
on behalf of an establishment.
that's correct, Chair.
And you were not at agriculture at the time, not at Free State at the time,
Yes,
because
I
this
was-
was in 2010.
I was at National Agriculture.
So did you explain to Mr. Zwane that you'd actually been to India before to go negotiate with the locals there, and you really did not need a protocol officer? Or was it irrelevant?
Yeah, it was a different, at that time, the arrangement were made for me by the embassy in India for the interpretation and all those. And that trip was undertaken as such. So how the province operated and how national operated was not the same.
You see, the other oddity for me certainly is you had been talking to the CEO of Paras. That's your evidence.
That's correct.
Did you not tell Mr. Zwane that, it's going to cost us to have a protocol officer? I've actually been talking to the man I'm going to visit, and we have a good understanding of why I am going to visit him in India. There was nothing unusual about the trip because you had arranged the trip. Did you communicate this to the MEC?
No, I didn't, Chair.
The reason I've always had an interest in Mr. Narayan is because of the dual role he seems to have played in the Vrede Dairy project. Because at one point, he's advisor to the Premier. At another point, he is representing Estina. And this is why, really, I ask these questions, because it's important to understand which hat Mr. Narayan was wearing as he did different things for the Free State government. I'm just giving you context.
That's
Okay. Can you then confirm, I've moved away from the trip to India, that any report that is tabled in the legislature by an incumbent MEC for Vrede, I beg your pardon, MEC for Agriculture, on the Vrede Dairy project would be based on information that was provided by you, by the department? Is that a correct assumption, that if the MEC goes to the legislature to address on the Vrede Dairy project, the information they are imparting, you would know about, you would have given to that MEC?
Yeah, there's two ways of it, Chair. If it is a written reply, then the department would do so. But if sometimes when it's an oral reply, the MEC can respond orally without
Consulting you.
Without consulting us.
Yes.
So there are two ways. If it's a written reply, yes, the department would have made that input.
If it's a budget vote speech?
If it's a budget vote speech, then there are two things in the budget vote. There's technical and political in the speech. We made the technical input into the budget speech.
And then as far as the Premier is concerned and the State of the Province address, where he refers to, or where she refers to, a matter from DARD, would that information be coming from the officials within the department?
That's correct, Chair. We submit our inputs, then they formulate it into the speech.
I'll come back to that probably tomorrow, because there's a point at which the Premier says that the milk processing plant was 90% complete. But I just give you that heads up, because I would want to know where he got that impression or that information from. But I'll show you the proper document tomorrow, because it's part of the financials that we'll be studying tomorrow. But it's something for you at least just to reflect on. Can we just deal with a couple of other issues? I'm moving away from Mr. Zwane's version completely. There may be something that pops up somewhere, but really, I just want to finish off some of the issues that arose from the 3 affidavits that we haven't covered yet. Most importantly, I don't think it will take us very long, Mr. Tabete. But for your convenience, you may want to hold on to Exhibit HH10B, which is the second file that now has the annexures to your 2017 affidavit. So you get the affidavit in front, and then these are the annexures that we were eventually able to locate. I'll just run through those annexures, and where you want to elaborate and go back into the FE itself, please feel free to do so. I really just wanted to place on record what annexures you had included and understand why you included particular annexures in that 2017 affidavit. You're with me. So if we look at MPT1, and I think there are flags, Mr. Tabete. If you go to 1, lift it, and you get to page 254, that document is the document that sets out the basic criteria for Vrede Dairy beneficiaries. Mr. Tabete, I believe that the file you want to be looking at, is the one with the pink flags. Are you happy with that? What's that? What's
MPT 001 is this one.
No, Mr. Maybe it's our fault.
I think tell him the exhibit number on the spine.
The exhibit number on the spine is B, not
B.
A.
Okay.
Yes. So it's the first, yeah, that's the correct one you had. Yeah. So those flags should be numbered 1 all the way down to 21, are they?
That's correct. Yes.
Those are your annexures. Some of them are missing, but that's fine. We'll deal with that.
Okay.
If you look at the first flag, number 1,
That's good.
if you lift, you get to the basic criteria for Vrede Dairy beneficiaries.
Okay.
Good. Have you seen this document before?
Yes, I have seen it, Chair.
While you were HOD at DAD?
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah. Was this document drafted before you signed the agreement of the 5th of June 2012 with Estina? Do you recall?
I can't remember, Chair.
Nothing turns on it, so I don't want you to worry about it, Mr. Tabete. The intention isn't to trick you or anything. I just wanted to try and locate it in this particular period of time. But you will agree with me when I say that to date, there's no evidence that this criteria had any relevance to the selection of beneficiaries. If you look at this criteria, it had no relevance or very limited relevance to the selection of beneficiaries. And I can repeat your evidence to you just to assist you. What you did say is that when you went to speak to beneficiaries, you wanted to know who's interested in poultry, who's interested in dairy, who's interested in red meat. So I grant you that. But that's about the only issue that you teased out when you were talking to beneficiaries. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. Chair, I agree. I've seen the document. But I have not interacted with the document because it's a document that official will develop. It doesn't necessarily come to the HOD for approval because this will then become their basic guidelines as they go out to identify and say these are the issues. Hence I say I've seen the document, but I might not have done reflection on it because I believe there are officials in the department who would have done that.
I just want to spend 1 or 2 minutes to make the point that most of what was set out in this document was completely irrelevant to the search for beneficiaries for the Vrede Dairy project. A quick example is the very last criteria, the one dealing with age. Age, more or less 65 was the cutoff.
Well, there are two ways of dealing with the document, Mr. Bashe, I believe.
Yes, sir.
One is if your proposition is that the criteria set out in it were irrelevant, is to either quickly read them and tell them, or take one by one and tell them, or otherwise he can read it overnight and you ask him tomorrow when he has had a chance to reflect on it. Whichever, because he says he hasn't had a chance to reflect on it.
Chairman, and please correct me, Mr. Tabete, if I'm wrong. Your ultimate answer is you know that the document exists,
Yes.
but it wasn't your function to put together the criteria. It's a junior function.
That's correct.
So you can't really speak to the relevance of the criteria because it's something that you gave an instruction it had to be done by, be it the chief director or below.
That's correct, Chair.
So I don't know if that answers
Yes,
the
okay,
issue.
no,
That's
as
how I
the-
understood the evidence.
Yes, okay, no, that's
Chairman.
fine. Just remember to make sure that you are able to be recorded, Mr. Tabete. I think your past 2-3 answers may have been quite soft.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, all right. But understand that your answer is you had no input in the creation of the document. You knew about it would have been prepared by officials, but you can't comment on the relevance of its contents to anything.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
Maybe I should also clarify that because the national CASP conditional grant required beneficiaries, you are correct when you say that you had to develop a beneficiary document so that you could meet that condition. Again, if I'm wrong, tell the chairman the facts.
Yes, Chair. There is a national document that speaks to the issue of beneficiaries. And that is the document that I am required to implement. Then from that document, then the department can develop its own document, maybe to cover areas where they feel maybe they are lacking.
And the document that would be required for purposes of the agreement with Estina and getting that conditional grant from CASP would be the document the department had developed. Your department.
No, Chair. The requirement is meeting the criteria of the national department. When you meet those requirements, then you are allocated the funding, not the departmental one.
Oh,
Because national has given the conditions. There are conditions that goes with the money. So you have to meet those conditions of national for the money to be allocated.
now I know one of the reasons that the CASP grant was withdrawn was because you failed to present a beneficiary list that met their condition. Am I correct?
Chair, that is not correct. The list was provided. By the time they withdrew, they already had the list. Hence, the reason for the withdrawal had nothing to do with beneficiaries. It had everything to do with what I had explained earlier, that Treasury had requested the department to do so.
That is your evidence, Mr.
Yes.
Tabete.
Yes, and there is a letter, Chair, from National Treasury to Agriculture requesting them to do so.
We have somebody coming from CASP who will either confirm what you're saying or differ with what you're saying. And tell me that my interpretation was wrong. That's fine.
Yes, Chair. I have seen, I had an advantage of being provided with that. I think that letter is an exhibit in there.
I don't think there's any merit in going into the detail of the criteria here as I had wanted to, because you say you had nothing to do with it. So I will move on to the next point, which is Annexure 2. So at least the chairman knows that not only did you set out criteria, basic criteria, you had a list, which is part of Annexure 1, which was prepared by the department.
That's correct.
And on your version, that list complied with the requirements of the national office. Please go to the next annexure, Mr. Tabete. Now, as I've understood your affidavit, this presentation was made when you consulted with Nestle, Parmalat, Clover, Dairy Belt. If you look at your paragraph 7 of the 2017 affidavit, and for your convenience, it's the first document in the same file. You can even stay with the same file. It's actually, yeah, we just repeat it. We simply put it there for convenience. You say, this is the document that you relied on, and then you continue to say no response was received.
Yep, that's
You're in
correct,
agreement with that. If you look at this document, Mr. Tabete, please explain why any of those dairy companies would have been persuaded to invest, to become partners with you in the Vrede Dairy project. Because if you just page through it slowly, just go through it, it actually tells you on the first page that it's the Mohuma Mobung Agriculture and Rural Development Framework, 2012 to 2016.
Hang on, Mr. Bashe.
Chairman.
Last time I heard was when you were referring to paragraph 7 of his affidavit.
Of his affidavit,
You have
which,
moved somewhere else.
Chairman, it refers to this
Yeah.
document.
And that document is at page?
It's at page 262. It's the second flag, Chairman. Flag 2.
Yeah.
And so I'm going through all the annexures. This is what he had annexed to his affidavit, Chairman.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm asking him to explain
Yes, no, that's fine.
the relevance of this to the people he said he spoke to when he was looking for local partners.
Yes, yes.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Tabete.
Yeah, Chair. This was the generic project, Mohuma Mobung Agricultural Rural Development Framework 2011, which we presented. But depending on who's the party we are talking to, then we then emphasize on specific areas of interest. So the presentation is generic, but the discussion, then they will focus as you enter into discussion.
That is not what you say in your paragraph 7, because what you communicate in your paragraph 7
Yes,
And,
Chair.
and it was an important paragraph because you were to decide on whether to use local companies or look further afield. And you say this is the presentation you used. And on the basis of this presentation, there was no response received. That is what you say in paragraph 7.
That's correct, Chair.
Now, just by way of example, really to illustrate the point, if you go to page 266, I'm really just illustrating the point. When you look at that particular schedule or diagram, it's simply at page 266, Mr. Tabete. It really, under Thabo Mofokeng, which is where Frede would fall. If you run down that column, you speak about cattle, maize, wheat, flowers, asparagus, apples, cherries, peaches, vegetables, soya beans, potatoes. Now, this is a pitch to me, Parmalat. Why would Parmalat be interested in working with you?
Chair, I'm trying to get to...
Page 266, that's the one. So you go to Thabo Mofokeng, and that's the Vrede area. Vrede falls within that particular district. And you're trying to get money, you're trying to get partners, you're trying to get interest from local people to work with you and set up this mega dairy project. And you show them a document like this. This is what I've understood of your paragraph 7.
Chair, can I refer you on the same presentation to page 272?
272. Chairman, are you there?
Yes, I've got it.
Continue, Mr. Tabete.
You'll read from the column from the left, it says Thabo Mofokeng, where it says mostly rural.
No. Yes, I'm with you. Yes.
Yes.
The first column.
Yes, the first column. And then the second column is the column that talks to the corridor. The third one talks to the focus areas. And then you'll see in the focus area, there is made specific of the areas. I think we did discuss them before. And then until you go to the column where it says commodity type, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 column number 5. Then you would be able to see dairy there becomes a commodity type to be implemented in Thabo Mofokeng, and you would see on the corridor and also the focus areas, you would see which areas we're intending to focus on, which we have discussed for Risbeck, Fixbeck, Memel, Vrede. Hence I say this is a PowerPoint presentation. A PowerPoint presentation, you present it, you talk to it. If you are not in the presentation, you're not going to be able to understand. So you summarize in your PowerPoint presentation, and then you talk to the presentation, you talk to the people that are sitting there, you explain to them. But this is just a presentation that we gave to them. But what I'm trying to explain is the issues that you are looking for. They are covered in the presentation.
They are hidden, if at all, anything else. You can look at the very next column, having pointed us to the dairy, mention of dairy in column number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yes.
Column 6, livestock improvement, dairy cow hotel, agro-processing / value-adding hub, Harrismith, grains, dry bean production, and water reticulation, market infrastructure development, My simple question, Mr. Tabete, is how do you expect an investor to look at a presentation like this and say that Dairy Cow Hotel sounds like a brilliant idea? You can't. If you go to page 280 of the same document, and I really am just illustrating the point, it's the same point. There you talk about a mega pilot project, and there's a chart provided there. I'm just getting there myself. Free State DARD. Planning agent, strategic partner. A most unhelpful presentation. If what you really want from Nestle or Parmalat or Dairy Bell, etc., is their attention, asking them to pay attention to what you can do with the Free State and dairy farming in the Free State. On page 285, there's no mention of dairy. I've actually got a little list here, just to illustrate. On page 272, where Thabo Mofutsanyana is mentioned, commodity approach, it just is not a very helpful document. Anyway, that's the essential question, because you annexed this document to your affidavit. I don't want to spend too much time on making the same point. It's your document. You use it to try and gain interest from big boys and girls, money-wise, who are actually operating also in the Free State. Anyway.
Well, it may be I think it's an important point, Mr. Bashe. Are you able to respond to what Mr. Bashe is putting to you? She is in effect saying, remember you told me previously that you would have liked to have got local partners,
Yes.
companies from South Africa, to partner with you. But you tried and you didn't get them. Remember, I think at some stage I may have said something like, it's difficult to understand why you would not get companies interested in South Africa, but you would have to go all the way to India and then get one that was interested there. Now, in the context of what she's putting to you is, how could you have hoped to get anybody to buy into this if you gave them a document that was not helpful in making that kind of decision?
Yeah, Chair, I don't agree.
Yes.
Because you call a meeting and you sit and you discuss. Then before the discussion, you give them a broader picture of what we want to do. You give them this presentation. Now, this presentation, you give it to everybody because it talks to the agriculture in the Free State in general. And then you sit in the meeting and you say, one of the focus areas we want to do, why we have called you, is this one. And we know you are expert in that particular area. So looking at the document to be talking to what you intended to do is not all that you had discussed in the meeting. All I'm saying is that we had a meeting, we presented this view to them so that they have a holistic picture of what we want to do, which we have done to everybody, and then you then become specific depending on the audience that you are sitting with, what you want to talk about on that particular day.
Is this the same document you took to Paras when you went to speak to them about the possibility of having them as a strategic partner?
Yes, Chair, this is one of the documents that we had. But when you talk to Paras, they are not a South African company that have got interest in the generic agriculture. That you would have done when you are sitting with a South African company of what is our intention in the Free State agriculture. So it's a different, but yes, I agreed. We also took this document with us.
I actually asked the question if this was the document you relied on, if this was the document you took. You say it is one of
the documents we took.
So you had other documents
Yes, we had also another document that we had prepared
that was more dairy specific.
was giving them the picture of the dairy in South Africa.
Why didn't you take something like that to Parmalat or Nestle?
But they have the picture of the dairy in South Africa. I can't go to Parmalat or Nestle and tell them about the dairy in South, because they know those facts and figures that I had presented to them there. All I needed to persuade them to work with us, because they know the industry even far better than I would have explained it. All I needed them to say, this is what we want to do. It's informed by this document of ours that we have developed. Can you work with us? We want to focus into dairy. But when you go to India, then you give them the picture of the dairy industry in South Africa, so that they have an understanding of if they would want to go, where are they going?
Yes.
Chairman, Mr. Buthelezi appears to want to
Yes, is there something?
say something.
Thank you, Chair. It's
Yes.
not my intention to disrupt the line of questioning or
Yes.
proceedings, but in my calculation now, we've exceeded a good 15 minutes discussing this presentation, the quality thereof, and whether it could have found applicability locally or internationally or globally. And with respect, I've been trying to establish how it then advances any of the critical issues which we need to get through before the end of the day. And if it's a subjectivity point. It's subjective to say whether I consider one presentation to be of value or not. And if the witness testifies that, well, I think this was great, and the evidence leader does not hold the same view, we cannot sit and try haggle over that point, Chair.
Well, I don't know about 15 minutes. That might be.
Maybe I'm stretching it because I'm
you might be stretching it. Yeah,
Yeah.
But I think it's an important area. You would have heard me say to Mr. Bashet, the question might relate to something important. One of the things that still intrigues me is how it was not possible to find a company within South Africa to partner with them, and how Paras was selected, and
Yes,
how
sir.
company so far away was found, and so on and so on. Now, Mr. Bashe might have had more time than I have had to focus on this document, but it could be that her questions are aimed at saying that the presentation, at least that part of it that's in document form that you gave to local companies, wasn't the kind of document that had any chance of persuading them to come on board. And maybe, and she's not necessarily saying that, but she will say so if she says that, maybe the idea was to go and get Paras, but be able to say local companies were not interested, but the way you went about it wasn't meant to generate any interest from them anyway. But that's one area, that's one angle on which she might be pursuing. And if that's the angle, I'm quite interested in it, because I think everyone who has been listening to evidence relating to this project, is wondering how come, a company, the company that was found to partner was in India, when the Department of Agriculture and the head of department says, actually we wanted local companies, but we didn't find them. They were not interested. So let's allow it, and then let's see.
I accept, Chair.
Yes,
I think what triggered me,
Yes.
in fairness, was that the initial question had started to say, how would Parmalat have accepted this? And then the question is now, how would Nestle would have accepted it? And I'm thinking, well, they didn't accept it. We now know this. We don't think it was a great quality presentation anyway. How did Paras then accept it? And then let's take the point.
That's fine. Thank you, Mr. Tabash.
Chairman, fortunately, I'm the one who's leading evidence, not Mr. Buthelezi. So let's go back to this.
Yeah. Chair, can I go back?
Yes.
It is my understanding that South African companies understand government operations and the programs that exist in government, and where they are required to participate. You don't need to lecture them in those things. And they know the amount of funding available for what in government, because they are exposed to that. What you require from your side as government is to persuade, not a document, repeat of a document of documents that they have seen, in order to be able to persuade them. In fact, my understanding would be, if that would have been the case, we would have had a great success on the development of smallholder farmers. If that is my understanding, that private sector would have wanted to be involved together with all provincial governments in assisting smallholder farmers, of which budget government has, would have achieved great success. We go to that persuasion, but we don't win. And I could give you an example, Chair. We were sitting in the Free State with another project, state of the art of fish, which was done by the Chinese. On the same principles, they came and they built a very beautiful fish research center and the production of fingerlings. And we are sitting here, we have got a very big fish industry in South Africa, which could have done it. Now, all that I'm saying is that it is not that easy that you go there and you persuade and people say you are interested. There are other dynamics at play that you cannot influence, and you have to move on. Otherwise,
Yes.
we would be doing, because all provincial government would sit with budgets where they want to assist smallholder farmers. But the entire industry in South Africa knows that money is available, and they could come, partner with the departments and implement. But it's not happening.
Just
Yes.
for I beg your pardon, Chair.
No.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah.
Just for clarity, and correct me again if I'm wrong, that Chinese sponsored fisheries project,
Yes,
the Chinese actually put money into it.
that's correct.
Yes. It's very different when you're talking to a local company, because you have to persuade them, for whatever reason, to put money in the same way you persuaded Paras to put money into this project eventually. So all I am saying is, I don't think you're comparing apples with apples when you look at the Chinese-sponsored fish hatchery. I happen to know about it.
That's correct.
And the approach you would have been making to the local South African companies. I did not understand you to say that you are asking them to sponsor, as the Chinese have done, and they do on the whole continent, but that you wanted them to come in on a different basis, but they're local.
Yes, that's correct, Chair. Chair, we persuaded the Chinese the same way, because we had to go there and say, if this project would be done in South Africa, in the Free State, this would be the benefit to us. And the Chinese invested the money in the infrastructure, but we had to budget the operations to make sure that it becomes functional. It became the responsibility of the department to make sure that that operates. So we had to make money available into that. But what I'm trying to explain, Chair, is that we would not have persuaded South Africans because they understand the situation. In some instances, I would actually say, in fact, it was the private sector should have come to the department to say, can we work with you in assisting these farmers? What would you want to do and how? How much money do we have? And then we plan together and we implement and we assist.
Chairman, if I might move on.
Yes, but what may be important, if you had in mind what I had in mind about what would have been important to put in the document, it may be, I say we are 5 to 5, it may be something for tomorrow to look at what the important features would have been that one would have expected to be in the kind of presentation that was given to the local companies. Were those features there, you know, that kind of information, but maybe that can be dealt with tomorrow.
I will look at that, Chairman.
Yeah.
I think part of the difficulty, of course, is also just the documents that Mr. Thabete has not been able to get hold of. For instance, his high-level desktop research would also have been helpful.
Yes.
But I know he has not been able to get hold of that.
Yeah.
Am I correct?
That's correct.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know if there are any other documents that you might have. This is really all we have been able to get hold of from various sources. But if you have better documentation to help the chairman understand these features in respect of a local company that you would have wanted them to bring to the table on this dairy project, it would be helpful.
No,
But I will also look at the Sitsoto presentation, Chairman, because it was similar, not the same, but similar. It was
Yes.
also a dairy cow hotel, and
Okay.
there might be things we can glean from that
Okay.
that would assist the chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Sitsoto, detailed had already been developed. Now, during the time when we were talking to strategic partners, we had not even developed a concept. We wanted to develop a concept together with somebody who would want to be part of it. So you wouldn't have a document like you have at Sitsoto, because Sitsoto had been fully developed by that time for implementation. But at this time, when you agree, then you begin to develop the document together. All that you needed. And it did not mean that after it has been developed, then you must put the money. We go there together, we agree, we do the investigation, we do the feasibility study. If we agree, then we implement. That was the level at which this was done. But you wouldn't have a fully fledged document by that time to present to somebody to say, please put money here. Because that was not the intention. It was to develop the document together with whoever was interested. Hence, you don't have, I understand that we would have done it ourselves first and done the feasibility study, done everything. And at that time, then we would go and say, we have a business plan. This is the money we need. Are you interested? But that was not the approach that we were looking at. Hence, we did not have a document that she might have been looking at.
I also have in mind, Mr. Thabete, the document that was prepared by Davi Marais, who you know gave evidence here, because he spoke to, much as it was a criticism in part, not in whole, in part of the Vrede Dairy project, but the elements of how you run a dairy farm, what you would require, are in that document. Maybe that also is a source document we can use to help the chairman understand those features that you would want to use to attract a local company to invest with you and work on something that will benefit the Free State province. I don't know if you think it's a good or bad idea.
Yeah. Chair, I don't agree because he was critiquing a document that had already been developed. He was not critiquing the intention. In his document, he said there was nothing wrong with the intention to develop. So he looked at the specific document that was developed already, and that's what he was critiquing.
You're closing all the doors I'm opening, Mr. Tabete.
No.
No, and you're entitled to, and I rely on your expertise. You're an expert in this field, which is why I ask you the questions. Shall we do this? Shall we do that? And I've understood your answers as well, that this was at inception, that you were trying to put something together. It wasn't a document that had already been prepared and you were just going to, you were asking partners to come and work with you and conceive and tailor-make something that would suit the Free State province.
Yeah. Chair, we previously when we discussed this, I've also indicated that using the same document and criteria, we managed to find other strategic partners in the Free State to do other projects which we have implemented. So this document did not dismally fail. We were able to achieve using it because there are other partners who said, we understand you would want to work with you, and those projects were implemented.
Chairman, I have 3 and 4 which we've dealt with already. Maybe I should just put that on record. Annexure 3 is the Memorandum of Understanding that we have already discussed between the Government of South Africa and the Government of India, so we don't have to go back to that. Then Annexure 4 is that motivation submission you made to the Premier with the recommendation of Mr. Zwane. Again, we've dealt with the material. We don't need to look at that. Annexure 5 we have not received, and it's a bit of a pity because that is the presentation that you brought back from Paras. We have not, unless you have it, we have not been able to find it, and it's not part of this court bundle of yours. If you have it, please share it with us, Mr. Tabete.
I think it is, Chair, in the court bundle.
Oh, so maybe he can look at it overnight, and then tomorrow morning, then he can report back.
Thanks, Chair.
Then tomorrow, Chairman, if this is a convenient time to stop, we can start with MPT 6, depending on what Mr. Tabete is able to find in regard to Annexure 5.
Yeah, no, that's fine. What is your assessment at this stage of how we are likely, how much time we might need
Chairman,
for Mr. Tabete tomorrow?
If we could have the whole day?
Yeah, no, that's right. We do have the whole day, but I'm just wondering whether, in terms of what we have covered so far, whether it gives any indication whether our pace is fine for the whole day or whether we might not finish, or it might be too little to make an assessment.
No,
what we've done today.
Chairman, the intention is still to finish. We're on question 55 of 120 before we get to the financials. So I'm going to chop. I'm going to try and
that's
reduce.
Fine. But the bottom line is that nothing that has happened this afternoon changes your view that we should be able to finish tomorrow.
I think we should, Chairman, simply because I will cut, because a lot of the material we have covered.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We had covered, but I'll also have a look. I do recall that I did have some issues that I wanted to look at again and then raise with Mr. Tabete, so I'll have a look.
Can we start at 9:30 though, Chairman? Is that convenient?
Well, that's what I was now wanting to talk about. Partly that's why I was asking the question, because I was wondering whether we should start at 10 or 9:30, depending on what our estimate is in terms of whether we'd finish on time. So maybe to be on the safe side, let's start at 9:30 to give us just a little extra. Would that be fine, Mr. Tabete, from your side, starting at 9:30?
Yes, I'll be fine, Chair.
Yes, and your counsel indicates it would be fine as well. All right, we'll start at 9:30 tomorrow. We'll adjourn for the day, and then start at 9:30 tomorrow. We adjourn.
All rise.